and all the deforestation that takes place, the species that are lost, the ocean depletion, all that and more, even affecting people in terms of starvation and world hunger. If all the gardeners sort of got together and saw the reality of all this and the environmental damage, then I'm sure most of them, or a lot of them, would be more open-minded about the vegan. Are your taste buds worth more than all this environmental destruction, plus all the animals' lives, plus your personal health? Is taste that important? That's the question I'm really trying to ask people.
Yes, and that's actually the most difficult question, because it boils down to, is your own personal desire to feed your stomach more important than animals' lives, which is basically the crux of it. I think that's why so many people don't want to think about that, because it does just boil down to that.
Yeah, and also, it's not just you, it comes down to your offspring as well, to your grandchildren. Your personal taste, does that outweigh the future of your grandchildren and what sort of world we're going to live in? Because it will affect it. And I think most people think they're going to lose something. I know when I started thinking about being vegan, I thought, well, I'm going to miss this. I'm going to have to give up that. And it's all, the emphasis is always about what I'm going to have to give up. And I think what people have to try and understand is that, first of all, you don't give up anything. What you give up is, you stop taking what isn't yours to start with, another being's life. That's one way of looking at it. You think you're going to give up a lot of things, and really it's so easy. If I'd known how easy it was, I would have done it a million years ago,
Yeah, same. Although, that said, it wasn't as easy. I did try about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's much easier now than it was then.
For sure, yeah.
And it's much easier, even more so than it was 20 years ago when people were doing it.
Well, yeah, exactly, definitely. So if people can get over the fact that they're going to miss anything, because you won't, all the tastes that you're used to now and the textures are replicated in the vegan versions. So you don't actually miss anything. You just cut out all the violence.
Yeah. The only thing I think I would say is it takes more time, I think.
To begin with, I think there is a little bit of a learning curve to begin with. Certainly saves time in the supermarket. You can cut out about 2/3 of the supermarket. Yeah. But in terms of preparation and learning recipes, and I think there is a little bit of a learning curve, but not excessive. It was a real education to me. It's opened up a whole new world, new tastes. I mean, I've had a really good upbringing in terms of taste. My Anglo-Indian heritage meant that I was eating garlic before Elizabeth David was promoting it in the 60s, And so we had a great range of a great variety of tastes. But even since then, my repertoire for cooking has expanded in all sorts of directions, eating vegetables and fruit that I hadn't eaten before. And it's only because I'd never been that adventurous with it.
I think my friend summed it up. She went vegan for a while and she said, I fell in love with cooking again.
Yeah.
And I went to the supermarket and I was genuinely excited for the first time in years to be in the shop and in the spices aisle and things. Because I just thought, wow, I can be really creative. And it made me feel so excited about food, whereas I'd just seen it as something to... That's
right. Have you got the Bosch book?
No, I haven't yet. No.
Well, the Bosch book is really good for anyone who thinks they might struggle with being vegan. Bosch, Bosh, have got a YouTube channel as well. And they just do quick, easy recipes that everyone knows about, and it's just the vegan versions of it. So that's the easiest place to start in terms of cooking.
So you were talking about on the allotment, a lot of traditional gardeners and even new gardeners don't garden with a no-kill policy or with the sort of vegan aspect of it in mind. How do you cope being alongside people who don't garden in that way? Yeah,
that's difficult. Fortunately, we've got a buffer zone next to us with an orchard, a community orchard, which I manage. So nothing comes from that side. On the other side, only half of it is used. And as far as we're aware at the moment, they don't use chemicals. So, I mean, I've heard stories of other organic gardeners on the allotment. They've got people who use herbicides next to them or insecticides, and sometimes you see a great big brown patch creeping on their side just from all the chemicals that's been used. It's quite scary.
I thought it was interesting. I was reading an interview with you actually from a while back, and you said something like I hate killing anything, even green fly. And then you put a caveat on the end of it where you sort of distanced yourself a little bit from, I think, you referred to it sort of a bit hippie or that kind of thing. I think now you've really become very brave and outspoken with your beliefs in that kind of aspect of things. How do you see that progressing for you personally in the world of horticulture? Do you think people will be less worried about speaking out?
Oh, I hope so. Since those last couple of talks, one for Hortifloca and something I did for Pro Landscaper at Sandown, I've had people come back to me and say they want to learn more. I've had to send information to them. One wants to be an activist, another one is thinking about it. So I think there'll be a slow trickle to begin with, and eventually it will get faster and faster as people start becoming... once it's seen as normal, once people start thinking, well, if he said it, then it should be okay. I mean, it's nice that you've come to talk to me about this, but I don't have the influence that some people in this world, like the Monty Dons and the Alan Titchmarshes of this world. I don't have any sort of influence like that at all. But once you get someone like that, I mean, consider Lewis Hamilton, who's just started becoming an animal rights activist. He's got a following of 9 million people on his Instagram account. You can only dream of having that sort of influence. But once people like that do start becoming more vocal, then things will happen even faster. Because clearly he's not mad, and that's the way it's going to go. It has to be slow to begin with, but eventually it will gather pace.
And I think some people see celebrities promoting it and think that it's a bit of a trend and that there are people cashing in on it. Yeah. Do you think that there's any truth to that?
Yeah, there are some. I can't remember the names of them. I don't spend, most of the time I spend on social media is stuff I'm putting out, so I don't really pay too much attention to other people, certainly not celebrities, but I've heard stories of some celebrities going vegan and then coming off being vegan, and they're just doing it for publicity, clearly. So that's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in. We are humans after all, and we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. Not even vegans are perfect by a long shot, but we do our best. Unfortunately, you do need celebrities, though. That's the way you get messages out, by capitalising on that. It's sad that we have to do that, but that's the way the world works.
There have been people on social media who have been coming at it from, I think, a very informed perspective, but saying that if you were to eat, say, grass-fed meat, that is better for the environment than a vegan diet. And it's better for farming and, and what have you. Yeah. Do you think there's any truth in that?
There's certainly truth in the fact that the animals' welfare would be better. In terms of emissions, I think I've read conflicting reports about how it would affect emissions. But the one thing that's clear is that there isn't enough land on the earth to actually do that. Then it becomes an elitist thing. It's only that, you're talking about high welfare meat is going to use a lot more land and is going to be a lot more expensive. Then it does become an elitist thing. It's like those who can afford that sort of meat can only have that sort of meat. So I've got a bit of a problem with that. I mean, what they're doing down at Knepp Farm is amazing. The rewilding project that's gone there shows how you can return the land to the wild and have all sorts of biodiversity. Has just been fantastic, the way it's come back to life. But the amount of land that we use for livestock in the country is enormous. So you imagine making that, if it all went to rewilding, there just wouldn't be enough land, basically. So we consume far too much. So, I'm like an abolitionist. I come from that sort of standpoint, so I'd rather see it just all wiped out completely. Even if people cut down on meat, that would have a massive effect. Yeah, a lot of people just think by cutting down can help, and it will, but I always think that better to get rid of it completely. And there are issues with that. It's like, what happens to the land when that happens? That's a really interesting question. I mean, there's people like Ian Tolhurst who have shown for the last 30 years he's been gardening without animal inputs, so it's a closed system. There's no animal fertilisers being used on his farm at the Hardwick estate. So he's got the template for how farming can be improved and how you can it can be sustainable without any animal fertilisers. And they're using agroforestry and wood chip and also green manures to maintain fertility. And he's showing that it can be done. So there's all sorts of interesting things coming up. And I think the more veganism comes to the fore, the more people are going to have to look to these alternative ways, because you can't just ask farmers to give up farming from tomorrow. There's going to be a transition phase. And in that transition phase, the government are going to have to try and help farmers in that transition so that their livelihoods can be maintained. So, veganism isn't against farmers. We need farmers on our side. And we need to learn new techniques and new methods of sustaining the world without having to eat animals. But, Ian Tolhurst, if anyone really wants to know more about organic farming, Ian Tolhurst's work at the Hardwick estate is really worth looking into. And we've also got Matthew Appleby's book coming out soon, which will tell you a lot more about vegan gardening and the techniques involved. If people really want to know what goes on in farming, animal agriculture in this country in terms of welfare, they ought to go and look at a film documentary called Land of Hope and Glory. And you can just type landofhopeandglory.org and you'll see recent footage in the last 2 years of farming practices in this country and slaughter practices. So it's, a lot of people say, oh, well, it doesn't happen in this country because it's, it's only happening abroad. But it's really not true. This is standard practices. If you go onto that website and watch this free documentary online, you'll just see what happens. You can make your own judgment. So it's really, I suppose what we're trying to do is just put knowledge out there. You can only try and educate people. If they once they've seen it and make the decision, okay, yeah, we're happy to still fund this awful stuff for our taste buds, then at least you've tried. But, most people won't even watch it. And I don't think that's a very good way to approach things. I think you need to arm yourself with knowledge. Once you've got the knowledge, then you can make a decision. But don't dismiss veganism purely on conjecture and some imagination, this imaginary old McDonald's farm where all the cows, pigs, chickens, sheep, goats are treated really well. It doesn't matter how well they've been treated during their life. To have it cut short with a knife across the neck and strung upside down is just horrific. And unless you see it, you won't believe it.
That is the problem. There isn't that much information out there yet, and it's still a bit of a grey area.
Okay, here we are. How much of the world's land would we need in order to feed a global population with the average diet of a given country? And it says livestock takes up nearly 80% of global agricultural land, yet produces less than 20% of the world's supply of calories. The UN has just recently said that we need to move away from dairy and meat in order to cut emissions. So the impacts on climate change are enormous. So it's all been said, but no one wants to no one wants to believe it. I mean, it's a hard thing. If you've been brought up since childhood, being taught that it's all fine, everything's killed nicely, and you can just go about, you can eat as much meat as you like. You've been taught that since birth. It's very difficult to disbelieve it, and it's quite a big step. But the information's out there now. Back in the old days, we didn't have computers and you couldn't Google anything at the drop of a hat. So the truth is there. It's whether or not you want to see it. That's all.
Have you got any sources that are really good, objective sources of information with regard to, especially the farming aspect of it?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I've been looking at what the UN have been saying and the World Health Organization. Tell you one thing from the health point of view, a great resource from the health point of view is a guy called Dr. Michael Greger. He's independently funded. It's almost like a crowdfunding thing, so they're not biased in any way, either towards veganism or towards meat and dairy. He's done it purely from an independent point of view. So his findings on nutritionfacts.org are really good, really insightful. There is the film Cowspiracy, and there's loads of updates. If you go onto the Cowspiracy website, they update that as and when facts come in. A lot of the facts are disputed from the emissions point of view, but that's only one part of it, and they've got all their sources on there. Obviously, fossil fuels contribute massively to emissions as well. So there are some things disputed on that, but certainly in terms of pollution, ocean dead zones, deforestation, 80% of deforestation is caused by animal agriculture. None of that's really disputed, and the pollution that goes is just causing so much trouble these days in the sea. All the water runoffs and nitrates coming from rivers. It just goes on and on and on. And one of the worst things is the species extinction as well in rainforests. We're killing some. I can't remember plant insect and animal species, we're losing about 130 a day.